going to record this webinar. And we are recording it so that we can put it up on our YouTube channel. So I do want to remind everybody, if this is the first time you've attended a tech workshop webinar, that's fun to say, we do record our webinars and put them up on our YouTube channel. We send out a follow-up email after the workshop with the handout for today, as well as the link to the video that you can access on YouTube. And then we also will, if we have an activity sheet, we'll put that in there. And if there are some questions that get asked that we feel like may need a longer answer or for us to look something up, we'll also put that in that email. I'll go ahead and start by saying my name is Susan Winkler, and I am our technology librarian here at the Champaign Public Library. And with me today, we have Rebecca Van Dusen and Nathan, who is our practicum student in the technology department here at the library this semester. And I'm going to go ahead and let you know that if you have not experienced Zoom before, or if you'd like a little refresher, down at the bottom of your screen, you're going to see a chat bubble. And we do ask that you use the chat bubble to type in any questions you might have. All of you are muted upon entry. And then we don't see your videos, so you don't have to worry about that. But if you would, go ahead and type your questions in the chat, and then I will relay them to Rebecca and Nathan. And then Rebecca will also relay them to me and Nathan, and vice versa. So we've got that chat covered. Don't worry, put your question in there. We'll make sure it gets answered. We do also have a raised hand button. If you decide you'd rather speak your question out loud rather than put it in chat, sometimes it can be complicated to type everything out. We can also unmute so that you can ask your question out loud. You just need to use that raise hand button for us to know that you want to do that. And then finally, there's also a CC and a little square, and that is our closed caption option. So if you click on that and you say show subtitle, that will give you a live transcription of what we're saying, and it'll appear down at the bottom of your screen. If you don't want that and it's on, you can click on it and say disable or enable, whichever way you want, if you want it to show up or not show up. Okay, all righty. So I am going to go ahead and let me introduce Nathan, and then I'm going to go ahead and share the screen for today's PowerPoint. So Nathan is going to go ahead and get us started. He's going to go through sort of our conceptual portion today, and then Rebecca and I are going to do some live demos. So if you give me just a moment here, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and I'm going to go ahead and share from the beginning here. And let's go ahead. Well, I've got to move that out of the way. One moment. All righty, let me move this over here a little bit. And slideshow, and from the beginning. Okay. All right, I'll let Nathan go ahead and take it away.
All right. Thank you, Susan. All right. So this is Intro to Finding Podcasts. I'm Nathan Sunshine. I am the Tech Practicum student at Champaign Public Library this summer. Slide, please. Great. So today, our agenda, what we will be talking about. So I'll read through this quickly. We will be talking about what are podcasts, who creates podcasts, when and where you can listen to podcasts. We will talk about all the different methods for finding podcasts. Slide, please. We'll talk about the different apps for listening to podcasts and the ones that are free versus the ones that have paid options. Talking about what a podcast subscription is, why the device you choose to listen to a podcast on matters. We'll discuss several native several native apps for listening to podcasts. So we're going to talk about Apple Podcasts and Google Podcasts, and that is for iOS and Android devices respectively. And those will be accompanied by demonstrations from Rebecca and Susan. And then we will end with terms and definitions. We'll talk about some resources, and then we will give you some recommended listens of our favorite podcasts, which is always fun. So what are podcasts exactly? So the word podcast is a portmanteau of the word broadcast like a radio or TV broadcast, and iPod. 15 years ago, most podcast users probably did listen from their iPods, but today you can listen to podcasts from a broad variety of devices, including your phone, your tablet, your computer, and probably almost any other electronic device that's smart enough to access the internet. So a podcast is a spoken word audio program, somewhat like talk radio. However, you can listen to a podcast on demand, which means whenever you want, and you can download a podcast onto your device for later listening. But different podcasts have different structures. Some have daily or weekly standalone episodes, while some are organized into seasons. And podcasts, unlike internet radio, they don't require you to listen live. You can download podcasts and listen to them whenever works best for you. You can just hit play, you can just hit stop. Slide, please. But different podcasts cover a vast array of genres and subject areas. So for example, news, hobbies, improv comedy, fiction, true crime, music discussion, game shows, trivia, you name it. They could be interview format, commentary format, it can be panels, narrative fiction or nonfiction, can be clip compilations, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It just goes on and on and on. So the tone of podcasts vary depending on the content and subject area and type. So just because you've heard maybe one podcast, that doesn't mean that all podcasts are going to be like that at all. And finally, actually, I need to add, most podcasts are free, but they usually include advertiser spots. So the number of ads will vary depending on the podcast, and many podcasts only approve certain advertisers for their show. So be aware that just like radio or TV, you may hear ads. And finally, because podcasts are not the same as radio or TV, they are not subject to FCC standards or decency rules. So be aware that some podcasts might include swearing or explicit content, but again, it varies. And if you're looking for podcasts that don't include swearing at all, you won't have any problem finding some. Slide, please. All right, I'm gonna take a second to breathe, and I'm going to ask that if you have any questions, please type them in the chat.
Okay, I don't see any questions so far.
All right. We can move on then. All right, so who creates podcasts? So podcasts are created and distributed by a variety of entities. And that includes companies or organizations like National Public Radio, New York Times, British Broadcasting, et cetera, et cetera. There are podcasts by famous people and entertainment industry professionals. For example, I've been hearing a lot recently about a podcast by Barack Obama and Bruce Springsteen, like a podcast that they have created together. Podcasts are created or distributed by podcast networks. So a few quick examples are Earwolf or Podcast One or WNYC Studios. Some podcasts are created by fans of a topic or show. For example, one of my favorite podcasts is a podcast by some friends who they watch an old movie, like one a week, and then on their podcast, they talk about the actors and the themes and what they liked or didn't like about the movie. So really, anyone can create a podcast. So that's why there's so much variety. Like, as you can see here, it's some of it's companies, some of it's famous people, some of it's just everyday folks like me or you. So there's a lot out there. Slide, please. So like I said earlier, after you download a podcast, you can listen to it whenever and wherever you want. After an episode is released, you can download it at any time. And podcasts are great because you can stop and start whenever you want, depending on what you were doing. Some people enjoy listening to podcasts while doing chores, commuting, working out, or lounging at the beach. So I personally like to listen to podcasts when I'm walking, when I'm washing dishes, when I'm getting ready in the morning, when I'm getting ready for bed at night. Like I very rarely actually just sit down and listen to a podcast, but I still manage to listen to probably 2 or 3 hours of them a day, which maybe that's a problem, but I enjoy it.
Just like me, I always listen to them on my way to and from work. So
Exactly. All right, I'm going to pause again. And if you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat.
and again, and you can always raise your hand too, and we can unmute you if you'd like to ask your question out loud. Okay. No questions so far.
All right. So how to find podcasts, what to consider. So if you are not sure how to start finding podcasts you like, think about what you already listen to. So some radio programs, including many NPR shows, are available as podcasts. You can also think about your hobbies, your interests, and what kinds of books or magazines you enjoy. Then another option is to think about finding podcasts that relate to your professional or your career interests. So some podcasts are fictional and others are informational or non-fictional, so they're not story-based. And some podcasts, like news shows, they're formatted so you can just start with the latest episode, but you can't do that with all podcasts. So for example, there are many long-running story-based podcasts out there where you can't start with the most recent episode because it won't make sense. It's best to start from the beginning and then work your way up chronologically to the most recent episode. But again, it varies from podcast to podcast. So how often do new podcasts come out all the time, but new episodes. So how often do new episodes appear? So some podcasts release new episodes weekly, some are daily, some are bi-weekly. Others might release episodes in bursts. So for example, they might release 8 in a month, but then it might be 3 months before they release any more episodes. So you never know. Again, depends on the podcast. Slide, please. So how do you find podcasts? So you can do topical searches within podcast apps. So you can just search within the app by a subject and it'll show you some recommended options. And I believe we'll be covering that later in this workshop. Another way to find recommendations are through internet searches. And I'm going to show you that quickly.
I'll go ahead and stop sharing so that you can share your screen instead.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So I'm going to go up here to the URL bar and I'm going to start searching. Does someone have a topic they would like to ask me search for? Just raise your hand or type a quick suggestion in chat.
We've got a suggestion of history.
Oh, that's a great one. There are a lot of history podcasts out there. So I'm just going to type, let's just try history podcasts. All right. So you can see up here, right when I search, Google is recommending some right here. Visionist History, Throughline. I love Throughline. It's a good show. Memory Palace, In Our Time. These are sort of auto-recommended, so sometimes there'll be some weird ones here, but it's a good place to start. And if you scroll down, we can see some web pages that are showing up that are kind of lists of recommendations. So for example, this one is from time.com, like Time Magazine, and it's showing best history podcasts to listen to right now. This is it's important when you look at these to look at how recent they are. This one is July 2019, so it's probably fairly up to date. So this one's from Vanity Fair. It's from 2020, 10 podcasts for history enthusiasts. yeah, this one's from 2021 from Mashable. So if I was looking at this might be the one I click. So, and you can search for just about anything this way. So maybe if I wanted to type for interior decorating podcasts, I could just search that and I get similar results. There's a lot to explore. Right, so I'm going to stop sharing and I'll let Susan take over again.
Okay. And let's jump into, okay. Can everyone see the how to find podcast search now?
Yes.
Perfect, thank you.
All right, so what are some other ways to find podcasts? So there are actually some podcast review sites. For example, podcastreview.org. You can look at podcast industry newsletters, and there's a link here to a list of newsletters from the Fellow Collective. And then the final one we have listed here, but I think it's maybe the most important, is recommendations from social media, from family, from friends, from coworkers, from other people you know. I would say probably half of the podcasts I listen to regularly are ones that I never would have sought out myself, but there was someone in my life who made me listen to an episode, or, you know, they said, hey, this is really interesting, like you should listen to this. So again, just ask around, just listen to what folks are listening to. And this is just like movies or TV shows, in that people love sharing. Like if you ask people who listen to podcasts what they'd recommend, like they'll be happy, so happy to share. All right, slide please.
Yep.
All right, again, please raise your hand or put in chat. Any questions?
Let's see, we have, okay, I don't see any raised hands or questions in chat so far. And you
Great,
can save your
thanks.
questions to the end too, once we've gotten through the demos as well. You can ask us about anything we've already covered. Okay.
Great. So you can listen to podcasts via a variety of different apps or programs. Now today we will be demonstrating Apple Podcasts and Google Podcasts, which, like I said earlier, they're native apps. So those are the podcast applications that are probably already installed on your mobile device. And both of those, since they're already installed, they're free. However, some other apps are available, and some of those for cost options. So for example, Stitcher Premium is free, but it has a paid version that comes with ad-free listening, additional content, and some other things. Overcast is similar. It's free, but there's a paid tier. Pocket Cast is a paid service, pay extra for listening on a web browser. Spotify, if you already have Spotify installed, it's free to listen to podcasts, but if you pay for Spotify, like I do, you probably, if you have it and you pay, you're probably paying for music. But if you have that paid version, you might also have ad-free listening along with that as part of that option. And then finally, for some podcasts, they have a free player available on their website. So it's really easy if you're on a regular computer to just navigate to their website and start listening to episodes. Right, slide please. So what is a podcast subscription available? Sorry, what is a podcast subscription exactly? So I think maybe an analogy for this is a magazine. So you can read just a single issue of a magazine, like from the newsstand or the grocery store or the doctor's office, and you can see if you like it or not. And if you like it, you can choose to subscribe, and the company will ship you new issues regularly to your mailbox. So podcasts are sort of similar. You can listen to an individual episode, see if you like it or not. And then if you like it, you can subscribe. Of course, the big difference here is that for the vast majority of podcasts, you don't have to pay to subscribe at all. It's just a little button you can click. And then how that works is the podcast application will notify you when new episodes are available. So again, you don't have to pay for a podcast subscription, but it's a nice way for the app to let you know when something you like is available. You know, again, just like a new issue of a magazine in your mailbox. And then once you're subscribed to a podcast, you can choose to download it or stream it from your device. Slide, please. So why does the device matter? So you can see here on the right-hand side of this slide, there is a list of the market share of the most popular podcasts. So you can see Apple Podcasts up at the top, and then Google Podcasts is fourth there. And those are the ones we will be discussing today. So this matters because most of these are available for phones and other mobile devices. Some of them may be available for laptop or desktop computers. Some might not be. And all of these different apps have different options. Like some of them are really similar. Some of them have a little more options, and some of them just have little quirks in the interface that different people like or may not like. Like, for example, I started with Google Podcasts, and then I actually switched to Podcast Addict, which is further down here. And that's also a free app. So one of those interesting quirks is that some apps let you change the playback speed on the podcast. So I don't use this very often, but how this works is if you feel like it's too fast, like your brain can't process it, you can slow it down. Or if it's too slow, like there's been a couple podcasts I had to listen to for university assignments that were very slow. So I used the speed up option, so they were a little more interesting, and I would stay sane. And then one of the other quirks is that some podcast applications, you can install them across multiple devices, and they'll sync your playback progress. So what that means is, let's say you're listening to a podcast on your phone and you stop halfway through the episode, and then you do something else and you go to your computer and you want to pick back up. So you can just open that podcast app and then hit play, and it'll remember where you left off on your phone. All right, slide, please. Great. Again, let us know if you have any questions. And I'm going to hand it over to Rebecca, I believe.
Yes. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen now. And then I'm going to go ahead and let Rebecca take over here.
All right, so let me go ahead, and we're going to cover Apple Podcasts. And that can be downloaded onto an iPad or an iPhone. And let me go ahead and switch my video so you can see our iPad. Let me get that looking nice. So we have it on an iPad. Again, you can get it on a phone. So the Apple Podcasts app it's a purple app, and it's got kind of a human figure with some little almost like radio waves coming off of it. Now, if you don't have this already on your device, you are able to download it from the App Store, but most devices, Apple devices, will have this already on it. So let's just go ahead and dive right in. So I'm just going to tap on it to open it. And usually once you open up the Apple Podcasts app, it should bring you to the Listen Now page. Unless you've opened it previously and have it in the background, it might be on a different page. So let's talk about what the Listen Now page is. So the Listen Now page is going to have sort of a rolling list here of your Apple Podcast subscriptions. And I should say, with the new language, with the most recent update for their app, they're no longer calling them subscriptions. They're calling them the podcasts that you follow. Why I believe this is happening is because I think they're moving towards paid subscriptions, so they don't want that language to be confusing. So when you hear subscription, think about it as you're just following that podcast. Okay, So let's go ahead and talk a little bit more about this. So up at the top here, you'll see I have these 3 podcasts that I'm currently subscribed to that are in my up next. So these are maybe episodes that have been recently premiered, and I can just jump right into those from here. So I have this podcast called Unspooled. There's Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me from NPR. And then another podcast called My Favorite Murder, which is a true crime podcast. And then they're also going to give you some recommendations as I scroll down on this Listen Now page. It is also going to suggest stuff that I already like based on what I'm subscribed to. So I have some movie podcasts. It looks like a little bit like true crime stuff I'm seeing in here, and some other NPR podcasts. And it looks like there's also some episodes that they're recommending. So they're recommending shows, so a show with episodes in it, but they're also recommending individual episodes from shows. And then at the bottom of here, I have my recently played. And then you'll also notice at the bottom of my iPad, let me get my pen, that there's some icons here where we can flip to different tabs, and we're going to cover each of these tabs. You'll also see a little player over here. Now this might look slightly different on your device just because, you know, I'm on an iPad, it's a bigger screen. If you're on an iPhone, it might look slightly more compacted, but you should see a player there if you have a podcast playing in the background. And if I tap on that, that'll bring me to the player. We're going to talk a little bit more about the player later. But that's a kind of a quick way to jump into listening to a podcast that you have. And let's talk about our other tabs here. So if I tap on the Browse tab, that's going to let me browse what's out there in the podcast universe. So, you know, up here, there's some shows I can scroll through, and maybe I'm looking for something to find that I want to listen to. I can kind of come to this page and look for something. And I can click on something too if I want to know more about it. So maybe I wanted to get into this Oprah's Book Club here. I can tap on that, and then it will bring me to a page where I can see what the show is all about. I can follow the podcast, and I can get into the different episodes as well. We're going to talk about this page a little bit more in a second, but that's a possibility to jump right in right from the browse screen. Apple also has a couple of categories that they list things under. So alternate realities, more recommendations from stuff that I may like. And there's also stuff down here too. So I'll see trending podcasts. If I tap on that, it's going to bring me to some podcasts that Apple says are trending. And then I can go down and maybe I can get into the New York Times podcasts. So yeah, I recommend kind of coming to the browse page if you're looking for something to listen to and you're not sure where to start. Let's talk about the library page next, since that's our next tab. The library page is going to show you kind of a grid of what you've subscribed to. So these are the 3 shows that I'm currently subscribed to. And you'll see on the side here, there's a couple of things here. So I have shows, saved, episodes that I've downloaded, and then latest episodes. So we can go to each of those. So shows is just going to, again, show me what I've been subscribed to. Saved. So saved comes in handy if you're kind of browsing and you want to save an episode for later. Maybe you're not subscribed to it, but you wanted to make sure you get that episode. You can save it, and we'll show you how to do that as well. You can also jump into the episodes that you have downloaded. So here it looks like I have a couple of episodes. I have a My Favorite Murder episode downloaded, Unspooled downloaded, 1 episode of each, and a Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me episode downloaded. If I click on latest episodes, that's just going to kind of give me a scrolling list of the most recently released episodes from each of my subscriptions. And I can kind of jump in here. I use the latest episodes list quite often. If I want to jump back a little bit, maybe I've missed 1 or 2 episodes and I want to go back and see, maybe catch up on some of my subscriptions.
And Rebecca, while you have a moment here, I just want to mention that most of the podcasts that Rebecca can find on the Apple devices here, like the iPad, are also available for the Android devices. When a podcast is really distributed, they're generally distributed so that people with different kinds of devices, even a computer or a laptop, can access them.
Yes. It's kind of like when you have a TV, right? So you're going to get all the same channels. It might just be on a different brand of TV.
Exactly.
Okay, let's talk about search. So search is useful if you're looking for something specific or even browsing. So you'll see just by going to that search screen, I can browse by different categories. So maybe I'm looking for TV and film podcasts. I can tap on that category and it's going to jump me out to some of the stuff within that category. And I could scroll over and see more lists of stuff. So there's really just so much you can kind of look through just from that first search screen. But you'll also notice, of course, there is a search bar up at the top. So I can actually make a search. If anybody has a suggestion for something to search, you can put that in the chat right now and I'll do a search on it.
My fallback is going to be cats.
It always is for us.
So let's see if we get some other ideas from folks in the crowd here. Okay, so we've got climate change.
Okay, let's type that in. So I'm just going to tap on that search bar, and then you'll notice up here at the top it says all podcasts or your library. So all podcasts would search all of the podcasts out there on the internet, and your library would search stuff that you have either subscribed to or downloaded onto your device. So we're just going to do all podcasts since we want to look out on the wider internet. So let me type in climate change. And then I'm going to hit search. And you probably noticed as I was typing, there's some stuff that's auto-filling. So when I make my search, I'm seeing shows. So I can scroll through shows, but I'm also seeing episodes. So if I wanted to just listen to a specific episode on climate change, it looks like there's a TED Talk recently. It looks like quite a few of the shows have something either up here on the top, like this I saw as a show, but also it looks like they had an episode here. And you can search a lot. You can search subject, you can search people. Let me search a person. So I really like Conan O'Brien. I listen to his podcasts, but the cool thing about this is if I search for him, I'm not only going to get his show. He has a show called Conan O'Brien Needs a Friend, but I'm also, of course, going to get episodes from his show. But there's also some other shows that may have featured Conan. So maybe you heard of Conan being on a podcast recently and you weren't sure what it was. You can also just type his name in there and see if it pops up on the list of episodes. So sometimes I'll do that if I wanted to listen to somebody talk about something and I wanted to see if they were in a podcast out there somewhere. Any questions so far about any of those tabs on Apple Podcasts?
No questions so far. And
Okay.
again, remember, you can always raise your hand too, and then we can unmute you if you have a question. And you can hold your questions until the end if you prefer.
So let's actually go into, we touched on it really lightly before. Let's go into how to follow a podcast or how to subscribe to a podcast. So let's go ahead and let's do another search for something. Maybe I just want to look for something about movies. So let's do a search and see what pops up. Maybe we're interested in. Okay, let's do the 80s movies podcast. So I'm going to tap on it. So if you're interested in something, you can just tap on that cover. And then it's going to bring you to a page where it's got information about like their little blurb about what their podcast is about. It's going to tell you what the creators are. Maybe it might also list who makes the podcast or produces it. So for instance, let's go back to Let's go back to that Conan one because I think he has listed on it. Yes, so it looks like it's Team Coco, which is, I believe, his producing company, and then Earwolf. So Earwolf is a podcast producing company. They do a lot of different podcasts. And then, of course, you can jump right into the episodes if you scroll right down. Or you can click on that latest episode one and it's going to start playing the latest release. You'll also notice up in the top right corner, it's kind of hard to see. If you need me to get that a little closer to the screen, I can. But up here, you're going to have a plus button and then a button that has 3 dots. So the plus button is how you follow the podcast. So again, Apple is not using the word subscribe. They're using the word follow. So if I tap on that, now you'll see it says following, and I've got a little check mark up here. So following means that it's going to come into my library of shows that I'm following, and it's also going to show up in those episodes in my library as well. If I click on the 3 dots, I have a couple of options here. I can unfollow, I can play the next episode, and there's a couple other things I can do as well. But there's also another important thing you can do from this screen. You can actually download episodes. So maybe I wanted to download an episode to listen to later. Well, let's see, maybe I wanted to listen to that new release. Let's do the Cecily Strong. So how do I download this episode? I can click on these 3 little dots next to the episode, and then it's going to give me some options. So let's see. It looks like I already have it downloaded. I think because that little arrow is showing up, but I can take that off my device if I don't want it there anymore. Let's download a different one. There we go. So it should look like that. It should say download episode if you don't have it downloaded. I can also save the episode. That's what I was speaking of before. If you maybe are not following a podcast, but you want to make sure you have that episode to listen to later, you can hit save episode and it will go into your saved folder in your library page. And you'll see my little progress circle here. It's going to be filling that until it's downloaded. And when it's downloaded, that means you don't have to be connected to the internet to listen to that. So if maybe you're traveling or something, you can get into your Apple Podcasts app, get into your downloaded episodes and listen to that. You don't have to be connected. If I were to tap on the episode, I get a little more information about it and I can play it right then and there. And it's going to go down into my player down here, which I can now open. And we'll talk about the player as well. So again, yours might look a little different if you're on a phone. I listen to the Apple Podcast app on my phone, and this player will take up the whole screen. So it's showing both just because we're on an iPad, but keep in mind it might look slightly different if you're on a different device. So we have our play button right here. We can just hit that if we want to play. It should play automatically though. And you'll see our progress bar. We can slide this back and forth if we wanted to jump ahead in the episode or jump back. We can also jump back or jump forward in the episode. So maybe there's an ad playing and you want to just jump forward like 30 seconds or a minute. You can just tap on that and it's just going to jump our progress bar there up 30 seconds at a time. Or we can go back. Maybe we missed something or wanted to hear something again. We can tap that. This is my volume bar. I'm not going to move that just because it's going to start playing. You'll also see a little AirPlay button. So this is if you wanted to maybe play it to your other device. Maybe you had a TV you wanted to play it through, like a smart TV or a tablet. You could use AirPlay. This 1X button is going to allow you to change the playback speed. So maybe you wanted to speed up the podcast or slow it down. You can tap that until you get to the speed that you want. 1 time is just the regular podcast speed. If you click on that little 3 dots, again, that's going to give you more options. So again, I have it downloaded, but I could take it off if I wanted to. I could go to the show, so I could just go to the show's page. That'll bring me back to my page. And of course, I could maybe copy the link and email this episode to somebody if I wanted to. I can play the next episode. I can play the last episode. I recommend just kind of playing around with this menu if you have time.
Rebecca, can I interrupt you for a second?
Yeah.
We have a question for what it would look like if you found a podcast that actually does cost to subscribe to it or follow it in the case of the iPad or Apple devices. Have you seen one of those, or do you know one off the top of your head that does cost?
I'm trying to think. I think Michelle Obama has one. I think it does cost because it may be like an original one for Spotify. Let me see. In my experience with stuff that's like, for instance, Michelle Obama's Spotify original, I think Spotify gets the rights to air the episode before any other service. I'm trying to think of something that costs. Let me see if I can.
Most of what I've come across is podcasts where they don't cost anything as long as you're willing to listen to them with ads. But if you want to listen to them without ads, then they do cost. So if you look for Slate, I think Slate, you can get a premium subscription to some of the Slate podcasts where then you can listen to them without ads. But I think you have to subscribe to them first that way. And you have to go to their website, and that's where you would then get the ones that don't have ads in them. So I don't know that there are any specifically that, but they would hopefully say that, if you wanted to subscribe, that they do cost money.
I think there was something I saw earlier. I was looking, they just updated this app. So let me see if I can find what I was looking at earlier. I think it's in the browse page. If I go all the way to the bottom, explore subscriptions. Let's click on that. Let's see.
Yeah, it's more rare to find one that does cost than doesn't.
Oh, here we go.
I will say that.
So it looks like here, this one, I was just looking on the browse page and then I went to explore subscriptions. If it does cost money, it looks like it will pop up something here and it says $4.99 a month, or I can try it for free for 7 days. So that's what it'll look like in the Apple Podcasts app. Now, I would say the vast majority of podcasts are free to listen to, like Susan was saying. You might have to listen to ads though. Most podcasts, I would say, if they're popular or well listened to, will have ads, just because that's how they support themselves.
Yes. Thank you, Rebecca.
Yes, and that is a new thing. So keep in mind, again, Apple is using the word subscription for podcasts that you're paying for. Like, for example, with streaming, you subscribe to Netflix, right? So you pay them X amount of money per month. But with podcasts, the language with subscriptions recently has been just you following the podcast. And I think Apple is getting away from subscriptions because they're going towards that paid model with some. So they want to make sure the language is different. Okay, let me make sure I'm covering everything here. Okay, you can also get into notification settings. So that's super useful if you want to get notified of when your latest show has been premiered. So if we get into our Listen Now page on the bottom here, I tapped Listen Now, and then up at the top right corner, you'll see a little like icon here that looks like a person, like an anonymous person. I'm going to tap on that. And then I can get into my notification settings. So that's going to allow me to toggle on or off what shows I'm getting notified for. So at the bottom, you'll see it says get a notification whenever a new episode of a show you're following becomes available. So that's super useful if you want to make sure you don't miss an episode of something. But again, if I wanted that on or off, I would just tap on that little button there. So this gray means it's off, green means it's on, and you're getting that notification. Any other questions about Apple Podcasts?
We have a question about where is the listen now? That's what's going to happen when you first log in. Yep. When you first open the podcast app. Down at the bottom, you can see Rebecca's got some tabs down there. Listen now, and then
there's browse, library, search,
And
and
search.
then your little player.
Your mini player.
Now, again, this might look slightly different. Your player might be on the top if you're on a phone, just because it's condensing the screen. So keep that in mind. It looks slightly different.
Yeah. And if you don't see it with your view right now, it may also be the size of your Zoom window. So if you can enlarge your Zoom window at all, that may let you see a little bit more of Rebecca's screen that she's showing. Too. Okay. Okay.
Any other questions I can help answer?
Okay. I don't see any questions now, but again, if you want to, you can wait until after the Android tablet demonstration, and you can certainly ask or raise your hand, and we can unmute you so that you can ask your questions out loud too.
Yes, of course.
Okay. Are you all set, Rebecca?
I think so. I was just making sure I wasn't missing anything,
Okay.
but
Yep,
I believe I covered everything.
Okay, let me know when you're ready.
Okay, let me change my video. Okay.
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 I think you're up next, Susan.
All righty. I'm going to go ahead and start my video over here. And then I'm going to stop yours from the spotlight there. And I'll go ahead and spotlight me instead. Okay. Hi, everyone. Thanks for bearing with me there for just a second as I switched between the host and the panelist screen. So now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go ahead and show my other video, which is going to be the other document camera here. Hopefully it'll take just a second. And then we'll see. Yes. All right. So this, I'm going to go back to our home screen here so everybody can see how to get to it. Okay. So this is our Android device. So for those of you who have an Android device, this is how you can access podcasts on your Android. So those would be folks that have either a Samsung device, Motorola, Lenovo, Google Pixel, for example, all of those that are running on Android. And if you were to go into the Play Store, that's your app store, you can download other podcast apps if you want, those that Nathan had mentioned. But there's one that is a native app to the Android device, and that's Google Podcasts. So if you see this one here, this is Podcasts. I think they all look a little bit like Simon Says in a way, because they have the different, like the red, blue, yellow, and green here. But this is the podcast app. So if we go ahead and tap on that, we can open Google Podcasts. And when you open
you
it,
may want to zoom out just a smidge.
Yep, so that you can see the home screen here too. Okay, so your full screen setup here is going to let you see along the bottom. We have three possible options. We have the home, explore, and activity, much like what Rebecca had at the bottom of an iPad, where you have different suggestions there. And then this right here is what we call the mini player. So this is actually an episode of a podcast that if I tap that little play button here, it'll go ahead and play it while I'm looking and searching for other stuff up here. Okay, so if we look at the top of the screen here, these are podcasts that we are actually subscribing to with their cover images here up at the top. And this home feed is essentially the new episodes of those that we subscribe to. So if I wanted to play something right from my home screen, I could pick any one of these episodes that are the newest episodes to play. So, and then we'll take a quick little look here at what it looks like. So we'll look at the LeVar Burton Reads here. So it's going to tell me when it was released, so 16 hours ago, that it's the LeVar Burton Reads podcast. The episode is called The Years of My Birth by Louise Erdrich, and then a little bit of a synopsis of that episode. Oops, sorry, 1 second. I want to go back for a second. It's also going to tell me how long it is. So it's 47 minutes. I can, if I tap here where it has the little plus sign with the little menu next to it, that's going to go ahead and check mark it. And then when we come down here to our activity area later, that means we've marked it in our activity area to play later. This download button right here means that I would like that down arrow that's facing down. That means that I'd like to download the episode to my device. So I could also go ahead and tap that. And then you'll notice it's very similar to what you get with the iPad, where it's going to go ahead and show us the progress in that circle until it finishes downloading to the device. Okay. And if it's downloaded to the device, that does mean I can be anywhere. And so like Nathan was mentioning earlier that he does a lot of podcast listening to while he's doing other things. I'm the same way. So if I'm out for a jog or enjoying my backyard and gardening, I might download the episodes first because I don't necessarily know if my internet connection is going to be that great out there. So I'll download sometimes ahead of time and then listen to them. Okay. Now, if I tap on it from here, I can get a little bit more information about that podcast and that episode. So here is giving me more information about the episode. I can tap on more and get a little bit more information about it. I can also see that I can explore the topics that are in this episode as well. And I could tap on either one of those and that would take me to further exploration of the topics. Up here at the very top, those 3 little dots. And in general, 3 little dots in technology usually means there are more options. So there's things that I can do. Let's say I've listened to half of it and I'm like, I'm not that interested in this episode. I can mark it as played so that I don't have to come back to it later if I don't want to. And then in my settings, I can decide different settings for my actual podcast app, like whether or not I want it to play back what I want to do with the playback, if I want it to do autoplay, and then I can also do things like show recommendations. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and hit the back button here. Now we've got this episode. If I want to play it, I can just go ahead and play it. I'm gonna go back to that home episode screen here where I've got all my different podcast episodes. And let's say instead of listening to one that I already subscribed to, I want to go and explore and find something new. I'm going to go ahead and come down to where it says explore and tap on explore. And here's where I can search for a new topic or a person or anything else. Right here, I can see the For You section is podcast recommendations provided by Google's algorithms. And they're going to be things that Google is going to suggest to me, as well as things that are popular and trending. We can go to news, culture, education, business, comedy, the arts, technology. Let's try technology just for fun. So here are some technology podcasts that are featured by Google at the moment. Okay. Other topics, you've got health and fitness, kids and family, history, TV and film. So let's go ahead and do what Rebecca did and go to TV and film. So we've got quite a few different options here. And then you can see below the full podcasts are up here with their cover images. And then down below, you can see different episodes. So if you wanted to preview and listen to one episode before you decide if you want to subscribe to a podcast, you could check here and do that. Okay. Let's go ahead and do the same thing where we search for a topic. Does anybody have a topic they'd like me to search for? If you do, you can go ahead and put it in chat and we can see what we can find. Now, we did have a question about whether or not the same podcasts appear for both Android and iPad, and that is true. So if I wanted to find one that Rebecca subscribes to, was it Unspooled, Rebecca?
Yes.
I can go ahead and put Unspooled in here and then hit search. And more than likely, I'll find the same podcast here. Now, it looks like I've already subscribed to it. So if you see right here where it says there's that check mark where it says subscribed, that means that I'm already getting those episodes of that podcast. So let's go ahead and go back and see if there's one. Is there one that you?
Someone does have a search suggestion.
Okay.
Classical piano.
All right. Let's go with classical piano. Okay, let's see what we can get. Okay, so here is a classical piano music. It's a free classical piano podcast with no ads and no membership. That sounds promising. Free classical piano music from popular composers and works. So if I wanted to subscribe to that based on the fact that I like that description, I can go ahead and hit that plus where it says subscribe, and that'll subscribe me to this podcast. If I wanted to preview, I could preview some of the episodes here. Now I'm also noticing it looks like these are from a while ago, so it looks like 2014. That's okay, as long as it's stuff that you want to listen to. That's great. Down here, it looks like this one is an episode result. So you get podcast results up above and episode results down below. So here's that Listonia classic music podcast. This one though, best classical instrumental music, looks like it was actually from 4 days ago. It's sad emotional music, so maybe we want to play that and give it a preview and see more about it. Here's one that is a journey through classical piano. So we could pretty much identify any one of these that we think might be interesting to us, and then go down just a little bit further and we get the results for shows. So here's one that says the classical pianist. Let's take a look at that show. And let's see, it looks like there is one episode of the show, and it's the favorite classical composers that this person wants us to know about. Let's try the journey through classical piano. Okay, so here's one. I think I'll go ahead and pick this one here, and I'll go ahead and hit subscribe. Okay, once I've subscribed to the podcast, I don't know if everybody can see this little list down here. Let me make it a little bit darker so you can see a little pop-up that came up. So these are the options for what I can do for this podcast now that I subscribe to it. Just like Rebecca was showing us on the iPad, you can get notifications of new episodes on your device right away. So if I do, yes, please tell me if I get new episodes. And then I can also download new episodes automatically. So instead of having to hit that download arrow every time I see a new episode, I can ask it to auto download those new episodes. Now you want to be careful with doing that, just because if you have a device that has a data plan, you want to be careful about the auto download new episodes, because that will use your data plan if you're not on a Wi-Fi network at that time. Okay, so just keep that in mind too. So I'll go ahead and I'm going to go ahead and tap off that. I don't need the options, and we're good for Journey Through Classical Piano. So now if I go back to my home, everybody can see that. I'll go ahead and raise that back up a little bit. You can see a little better. So I've gone back to my home now. And then if I wanted to look at my top here, you can see there's the new podcast we just added to our subscriptions. Okay. When I'm ready to play, oh, sorry, let me go back to Explore. I just want to mention too, you can also see down here at the bottom, it says search the web. So this is another way you could, like what Nathan was demonstrating earlier, it will search the web for any podcasts that maybe were missed that are not already in the Google Podcast app. Okay, so let's go back here, and I'm going to go ahead and pick, let's see, which one do I want to pick? I'm going to go back home and we'll demonstrate the playing with the player here. I'm going to pick here, we'll go with the Conan O'Brien episode that Rebecca was talking about. So if I want to actually go ahead and play it, and I'm going to switch from this episode that had Daniel Radcliffe to this one, I can tap on it. It's going to show me more about the actual podcast here, how many episodes there are, how often they have appeared. And then if I tap on it, I can go ahead and hit the play button here. And that will switch it so that down here,
This episode is brought to you by MailChimp.
don't know if everybody just heard that, but if I go ahead, then it's going to place it down here in the small, what I call mini player, and it'll just go ahead and play. If you want more control over the mini player, when you tap on it, it'll bring up the larger possibilities for the control that you want. So here we can see where we are in the episode. This is the episode timeline. We can go back 10 seconds or forward 10 seconds. We can, just like Rebecca was doing with hers, down here at the bottom, can everyone see that, the 1x down here?
Yes.
We can play it at a faster speed if we want. We can also enable, with this little half moon, we can enable a sleep timer, which I really do like, because if I'm listening to podcasts before I fall asleep, and I want to set a time where if there's enough inactivity where I know I have fallen asleep, I can tell it, All right, I want you to go to sleep after 5 minutes. If I don't do anything and hit any buttons or anything in 5 minutes, I want you to stop the podcast and jump out of the app. And that's what this sleep timer will do. Okay, and then I can close out of that. And then if you wanted to cast it to something else, this little screen down here with a little, looks like a little Wi-Fi signal with a little box around it. That means you can use it to Chromecast. This is a little bit like what Rebecca was doing, where she was talking about AirPlay on an iPad. It's very similar. You can cast it to your TV or another device in your house. Then down here with the 3 little dots, you can get more options of podcasts, and you could share on social media. Oh, sorry, I'll make this a little darker so you can see a little better. And you could share on social media or with anyone else that you enjoyed this podcast. Okay, so that's the basics with that. Let me go back and I'll show you the activity screen. So over here on the far, let me brighten this back up for you. Over here on the activity section, here is where you can basically build out a queue of the podcasts that you want to listen to. So it's essentially like a playlist of episodes that you want to listen to, and that's called your queue. If you want to know which ones you've downloaded, like we just downloaded the Louise Erdlich, I think that's how she pronounces it. This is now in our downloads. We also can look at our history of what stuff we've played and when. And then we can check out our subscriptions. And this is everything that we've already subscribed to. Okay. And that's basically everything there is here in this app. So when you're at your home screen, your playback, you can either play back in the mini screen, or if you want more controls, you can just tap on it to get more controls. If you want to advance between the current episode of one and immediately go to the next one, you can tap on it. If everybody sees it, and then it'll go ahead and start playing that next episode that's in your activity queue. Okay. Any questions about the Google Podcasts app? Or anything you'd like me to demonstrate with it?
I don't see anything so far.
Okay. You also have the option to change things within your Google account here when you are logged into your account. And if you see up here in the very top, your notifications over here, if I look at this, you can see here is the podcast app. Google Podcast is telling me here's what I'm playing right now. So if I wanted to jump back and forth into other apps, I can jump back and forth to other apps at the same time and still be listening to the podcast. Okay. All right. Any other questions about that?
I don't see anything so far.
Okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and I'll jump back to my screen here with my webcam. Okay. Any other questions? If not, we'll go back to the rest of our PowerPoint here. So we have a couple more slides.
And I'm happy to show something again too.
Absolutely. We can demo things again as well. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and stop my video over here. I'll remove the spotlight and stop my video. And then, oops. All righty. And then I can come back over here and I'll share my screen again for the PowerPoint. Okay, hopefully you're all seeing the PowerPoint again. And then I'm going to do this real quick. So this is in that handout that we've shared. Will be all the step-by-step things here. So I'll just go through this kind of quickly so we can move on to our next section. Okay, so we do have a list of terms that may come up when you're starting to work with podcasts. Streaming, and if you attended our intro to streaming workshop last week, you probably have a pretty good idea, hopefully, of what streaming means now, but it really refers to any media content, live or recorded, that's delivered to computers and mobile devices via the internet, and then you play them back in real time. So podcasts, TV shows that you might get from Netflix or Amazon Prime, Spotify, where you might get your music, that's all going to be streaming content. Okay, a playlist is a list of video or audio files that you can play back on a media player sequentially or in shuffled order. So in the most general form, it's basically a playlist of songs So instead of having, a CD, you might create a playlist of music from separate CDs to listen to. Or in the case of podcasts, you might pick certain podcasts that you want to hear the most recent episode of and create a playlist of those. Okay. And Nathan already mentioned that for our purposes, a native app is going to be an app that already is downloaded onto your device when you purchase it, or it's designed specifically for that device by the company. So in this case, that's Apple Podcasts and Google Podcasts. Download essentially just means to transfer whatever file from, or software or data from a distant place, like the cloud or the internet, to your device, your computer or your tablet. And then Podcatcher is probably the one that I think is most often used in terms of these podcasts. And that is an application that listeners use to subscribe to and listen to podcasts. So Apple Podcasts and Google Podcasts are both podcatchers. Now you can have a number of them, like we talked about earlier. It's Overcast, not Overcast. There's Stitcher. There's a whole bunch of them.
There was one called Overcast.
Was it Overcast or Podcast? No, Podcast and something else. Anyway, I'll have to go back.
Broadcast, podcast and broadcast.
Yeah. But there are a whole bunch of different apps out there. So you don't necessarily have to use these two apps that are native to the Android device and the Apple device. You can go and search for or get recommendations from loved ones or friends for other apps that they like that you could also try. So if you don't like the way the player looks or your interactions with the player for Apple or Google, you can go find another one if you want to. So, okay. And then we do have some resources. There's an Apple podcast listening guide, beginner's guide to podcasts, and some more information about what is a podcast. Okay. Any questions about anything we've shared so far?
I haven't seen anything in the chat yet.
Okay. So then we have some recommended listens. I'll go ahead and share mine, and then I'll let Rebecca share hers and Nathan share his for anyone that's still with us. So my two big recommendations are Travel with Rick Steves, which is a weekly 1-hour conversation with guest experts and callers about travel and culture and people and things that we find around the world that give life its extra sparkle, quote unquote. For me, it's nice, especially right now when I choose not to travel so much, to be able to listen to people who have traveled, talk about their experiences and their trips, and learn about different cultures and different cool things that they've done. Wait, Don't Tell Me is a weekly news radio panel show out of Chicago. Generally out of Chicago. They move all over the country sometimes too. And it's basically a trivia show with humorous quotes from the different panelists. So those are mine. I'll let Rebecca share hers.
Okay, yeah, you've probably seen these when I was doing the demonstrations, but I really enjoy Conan O'Brien Needs a Friend. He has his talk show. He's kind of transitioned out of doing his sit down kind of interview style, and he's transitioned to podcasts, and he's going to have a new show on HBO. But his podcast is really good. He has a lot of celebrity interviews, and he just has really good banter. I think he's just a really funny guy. And it's really fun to hear like the stories that he has with the people he interviews. A lot of times he already knows them really well, and it's just kind of fun to hear their relationship. And then the other podcast is Unspooled. So Unspooled, they have kind of 2 seasons. So the first season, and you can jump around in the episodes as well, is where actor Paul Scheer and film critic Amy Nicholson, she works out of LA. They both go through the AFI top 100 movies of all time. And they kind of dissect the movies and figure out why is it on the AFI top 100 list. So it's kind of fun to hear their opinion and maybe why or why not it should be on there. It's kind of fun to listen to the episodes of movies you've seen before, or that you maybe don't like, just to see what their opinion is. They also have industry experts come on. So sometimes you'll hear them talk to cinematographers or stunt people. And it's really fun to kind of get a background of how these films were made. And the newest season, they're also doing movies that they think should be added to the list. So it's kind of fun just to hear them. I'm a big movie person, so I really enjoy that one.
All right. Thank you, Rebecca.
Yeah.
And Nathan?
Yes. So my recommendations are, well, the first one is No Such Thing as a Fish, which is a weekly British podcast, and it's produced and presented by some of the researchers behind QI, which is a super popular game show in the United Kingdom. So each week they discuss facts that they researched for the show for QI, but they couldn't bring on QI, so they discuss it on the podcast instead. It's all sorts of different, random, funny, sometimes very obscure facts, but they have an excellent eye for history, and they're all extremely smart, funny people. So highly recommend it. And then my other podcast here is Nobody Listens to Paula Poundstone, which is hosted by Paula Poundstone and Adam Felber, who are both comedians, and they're both actually regulars on the show Susan recommended earlier on Wait,
Yes.
Don't Tell Me.
Yes, they are.
Yes. So they use their unique comedic sensibility it says navigate life in the 21st century. So every episode, they interview an expert in a different area. And it's a fun show because it's so random and chaotic and funny. Like, it has a format, but they're also interested in what everyone else has to say, that they go off format constantly, and it's hilarious. So those are my recommendations.
Excellent. Thank you. All right. I'm going to go ahead and share real quickly our upcoming workshops for August. The next ones, we are doing a series of social media. So we're going to do Facebook and Instagram, and we have a new addition, TikTok, which is taking the world by storm, shall we say. So if you've heard of TikTok, but you haven't jumped into the TikTok craze yet, we will walk you through how TikTok works and do a demo on the 31st of August. If you're curious about Facebook or Instagram, please feel free to join us for those as well. And then in September, we are hoping to have our next set of in-person workshops and return to in-person with our beginning of our new season, which will be getting started with keyboard and mouse, intro to Windows computers, and our split workshop that was file storage and file organization. We are keeping those as two separate classes because there's just so much to cover with that topic. Okay, and then here is our at least contact information for myself and Rebecca. And we want to thank Nathan for presenting today. Yay, thank you, as part of his practicum program. And then I'm going to go ahead and, oh, sorry, 1 second.
Let me also share the handout for today as well.
Okay. And then we do have book a librarian appointments. So if you'd like to book a one-on-one with staff, we can go over different technology topics with you. We're also available via live chat and at the email librarian@champaign.org, or you can reach out to us individually. And then I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing here so that we can put our cameras back on here. And then give me 1 second. And I will change our view to gallery so we can see everybody. Alrighty.
I just put that handout in today's chat. Now, don't fret if you don't get that today. We will send that out afterwards once we send out the recording. So you'll have access to like the step-by-step, guides to everything we covered in the demonstrations today, as well as the stuff that Nathan touched on earlier.
Absolutely. Right. Does anyone have any questions at the end here?
And feel free to raise your hand too if it's easier for you to speak your question out rather than typing it all in the chat.
Absolutely. Oh, and I did, while you were exploring the potential paid podcasts, I did try to find some in the Google podcast app. I didn't find any. I looked up the one you had that was called The Last Archive, and I didn't see anything in the Google window that said it was a paid podcast. So I don't know. That's
I
something
think
we
it's
can.
a newish thing. I think
Yeah,
everything in my experience is you're paying for the ad free rather than the podcast. I
correct.
think also the originals thing I think is a payment. So like if you subscribe to Spotify, you may get access to episodes earlier than they would be on, say, Apple Podcasts or Google Podcasts.
Yeah, we will look into that a little further and see if we can come up with a definitive answer for you, and we'll put that in the follow-up email too, with some screenshots if we can discover it. That was a great question.
Yeah, let me write that down.
All right, very good. And now I'm ready to listen to the newest episode of Rick Steves, which I saw has now been put on our tablet here. So I'm going to have to do it for myself on my my phone while I cook dinner tonight.
Yes, I think Rick Steves also doesn't he do like walking tour podcasts where you can queue those up on your device, and like if you're going somewhere, you can do the walking tours?
Yes, he does. So if you were to be going to Europe, he does have walking tours that you can download from his website onto your phone or your tablet for different places that you're going to. So if you were visiting the Louvre, perhaps in France and in Paris, he has a walking tour of, what he thinks are the major works that you want to make sure you don't miss in the Louvre. Or, he has like a Vaporetto tour for in Venice. So you get on the boat, and then you just go down the canal, and you can listen to him narrate what the different buildings are as you navigate down the canal. And like we said, so a lot of places do have everything also on their own website. So for example, with Rick Steves, he has, his whole website of guidebooks and, a store and everything else. But all of those podcasts and podcast episodes are also available via his website. So you can just stream them right off of his website too. So you don't necessarily have to put them into a podcatcher. You could go to the website and just listen to them too. I'm betting that's probably true for Wait, Don't Tell Me and some of the other stuff that's out there too. Conan's probably doing the same thing with his.
In my experience, if you go to like the podcast website, you Google it, there usually is a website where you can then go and just hit that player and then play it right from your desktop computer or laptop.
Absolutely. And if anyone is interested in creating their own podcast after having watched today's workshop and it got you all excited about what might be your niche topic that you have something to say about, we did have an art of podcasting class last night hosted by myself and our business librarian. That was a DIY how to get started making your own podcast. And that will also be on our Tech Workshops YouTube channel playlist here in a couple of days. So, which is why I was like, yay, all about podcasts this week. So we have 2 different podcasting classes. So, all right. Well, I think that's everything from us. If anybody has any questions, again, feel free to reach out. But otherwise, we'll see you next week.
Thank you,
Bye,
everybody.
everyone. Thank you.